Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to welcome my friend, Stacey Halfmoon. Welcome. What a fun treat.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here finally. Am I one of the official timber people?
Of course. You always have been. Actually, people like you inspire me to do things like this. So I want to say thank you for that. Stacey is Caddo, Choctaw, and Delaware, and we have so much to talk about. I just can't wait to dive in, but we've known one another for many years, and I know her as my sister friend. She's a great mom. She's a great sister to a dear friend of mine, Leslie Halfmoon, as well as others. And, you're just, I loved your auntie and your mom, and I just love your family, and you have a great legacy and heritage and longtime story. Before the show, we were talking about how we are really still on our journey, on our way. And the Halfmoon family has had this really incredible journey for many, many years. Since time immemorial. But I know you, and you draw from that heritage and knowledge and experience and legacy of your family, but also from the experiences that you have cultivated in your life. And so I can't wait to dive in. I hope this will be one of a number of podcasts that we do together.
Yes, that would be wonderful. There's a lot to unpack.
I tell you, I say that I gave a lot to what was the American Indian Cultural Center, now the First Americans Museum. But I tell you, it gave me so much more back. It really did give me so much more. And it really gave me relationships, and Stacey is a part of that, as well as other relationships too. And I'm so grateful for that experience. And I greatly appreciate the work that you have contributed to that project, Stacey, over the years, since probably around 2006, 2007. And then subsequently, your contribution to the Choctaw Cultural Center and the work that you do with tribes that are near and dear to us here in Oklahoma and beyond. But I really just want to talk about the work that we do. You're a consultant now. I'm so grateful for that. And she's my buddy. She's my partner in crime. And we just have so much fun together.
We do. We do. Thank you for inviting me to come on and to follow this trail of conversation wherever it goes. I have to say, when I look back on my life and my career, and I think about like these moments, you know how the older you get, you look back and there are these like moments that are just illuminated. And one of them is meeting you when I didn't quite realize it was an interview. And it was totally an interview. And we were talking about, this new project, this new...
In 2000,
yeah,
when we did the cultural program brief for what's now First Americans Museum.
Yeah. And, the dream of this idea of a cultural center that would be built to tell the story of all the tribes in Oklahoma. And just how exciting that was. Like, I remember at the time thinking, this would be almost a fantasy level for me as somebody who loves to help facilitate and tell stories, like especially Native people stories. And then a few years later, I went in and met you. And once again, I don't think I realized like the seriousness of the situation, like potentially this could be a job in the making. And so I was very casual. You were like, so, tell us about what you could do. And I said something like, well, never above making a pot of coffee. And
I know. I remember that.
And it was like just when I had gotten back from being at the Defense Department. And you were like, okay, I think you can do so much more than making coffee. But the point was, you'll never be I don't care where you are in your career in Indian country, you're always going to be making a pot of coffee somewhere.
Sweeping a floor. Yeah.
Like you better have that down. The ratio of,
we
grounds to water.
definitely need caffeine, especially in this museum industry.
Yeah, no, but that opportunity at the Cultural Center, literally, I mean, it was as impactful as my time working with my tribe, which really set my entire career onto a specific path. And then that just seemed like this gleaming beacon of opportunity and hope and light to, let Native people in Oklahoma finally tell their story. And it was just so exciting. And so I will always think of you as leading that project and kind of creating the team that began the entire effort.
Thank you. Well, it took a lot of people hand-holding me and encouraging me. And you're one of those people that gave me that confidence because, I tell you, it mystifies me when there are some people in professional settings that get threatened with people who are very knowledgeable and they feel intimidated by that. But I felt the safety, security, and confidence with having some of the most knowledgeable Native people working with me like you, and that I felt like I went into work and learned something every day about even my own people and other tribes. And you have such an incredible way of conducting tribal consultation, and your awareness and respect for diverse tribal cultures is, there are few people that match that. So I will tell you, you mentioned the Department of Defense, for the listener, Stacey, I began to learn about her. I knew her family. I knew her aunt before I met her, the great, late, incredible Marianne Britton, and just adored her so much. And my Chata sister. And, when I met Stacey, I was learning about her history of creating consultation protocol for the Department of Defense for our U.S. government. And the fact that you have a Native person doing that at that day and age, knowing our history and our journey, that's really special. And to have someone who's aware and knowledgeable, that's important too.
Yeah, that was, talk about you can take the girl out of Oklahoma, but you can't take Oklahoma out of the girl. That pretty much sums up me at a young age going to work for the Defense Department. And who knew when a lot of the work I'd been doing for the Caddo Nation, which again, as I keep mentioning, was just so, I guess I would say foundational to everything I would do in the future. It was so meaningful working on repatriation with the tribe, and NAGPRA had just passed. The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act had just passed in 1990. And I came on staff just shortly after that. And it really led to us having these relationships with federal agencies, with state agencies in our homeland. And it just opened up this massive world of, my tribe's history and me understanding more about who we were as a people and where we had come from. Because a lot of us don't learn that growing up. You might know a little bit. My granddad used to talk about going down to Louisiana, going down to Texas when he was a chairman. But I didn't really understand the full gravity and scope of our nation, our confederacy, and where we were until I got into that position. And then that led to relationships where they said, hey, you would be really great in Washington, D.C. at the Defense Department. It was like, are you sure? Are you sure you have the right person? And I went, and again, looking back, I feel so young when I went, but it just happened to be the craziest time in Washington, D.C. And I'll keep it short, but I'm telling you, 3 years I was there, saw a massive hurricane that came. I can't remember the name. Right. It came, it was nuts. It knocked, did all the damage. There was the DC sniper So we were all nervous to like go into any grocery stores. Everyone was like, watch out, don't park far away from the grocery.
I mean, it was crazy.
And then there was Chandra Levy disappeared the
Yes.
summer I got there.
I was up there the same time about,
I was like all nervous. And then we had
that was crazy.
17-year cicadas woke up and we're covering everything. The black locusts in Oklahoma, we have green locusts. And we had these little black locusts with red eyes that were just covering everything. And then we had 9/11, which I was across the street from the Pentagon. I mean, I was truly questioning my decision at that point.
Well, you had everything happening too with the Clinton administration at that time and with Monica Lewinsky. It was just the energy was really just, was interesting in DC and in the nation at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And after 9/11, everything changed, everything, security tightened. And, the day 9/11 happened, I had to try to get to my car, to try to get to my kids. It was all really a sanity check for anybody, I think, anybody. But the thing I'll never forget that sticks with me about that period and about that day in particular is how all these people were trying to run away, get to your cars, get out of here. And all the military people were running toward. They were trying to get there across the street to the Pentagon to help. And, you see something like that. And my mom even said, you should just come home. This is all so scary. And I had my kids out there. I had 2 children and who were in school in Alexandria, Virginia at the time. And I thought, this must be the Choctaw in me. Because I was like, you know what? No, I'm not running. Not hiding. I'm going to stay. I said I would come and do a job. And so anyway, very interesting period.
Warrior woman, warrior ways.
I guess so.
For the listener who, may not know about like Stacey's like Caddo relationship, she over many years has been really committed to the tribal historic and preservation aspects of working with Caddo people as well as other tribes and our Choctaw cultural ways and her Delaware ways as well as other working with Shawnee and others. But, you really helped me understand that unique and important way to recognize tribes who had that indigenous presence in what's now Oklahoma, working with your people and educating and what we've learned from historic sites, sacred, ancient sites, not just in what's now Oklahoma, but in the region, and just your mound knowledge and mound cultural understandings have really enlightened me for many years.
Thank you. Yeah. That is I'm trying to allude to like, that is a deep, earthy
Well, I mean,
topic.
Even from even making it, when we started building the mound at what's now FAM and just helping us articulate or talk about the identity of it and the language around it is like, we're the 21st century mound builders. Like you and Shoshana and I and our team, we were talking about this and, and just sitting in those, I really miss those creative sessions where you're like, at Spyro, what we learned, unfortunately, that they were looted, but what people learned during different excavation and other experiences, for better or for worse, was really that like this was a cultural center. You had shell from, aspects of the continent, and you had turquoise, copper, and there was exchange. And it really began to weave together a narrative, an identity, a language that really spoke to the diverse, identity of what would become the First Americans Museum. And so it was a way we began to talk about community and cultures coming together from diverse experiences and backgrounds from different aspects of the continent, from like the mound building cultures, and from a creative, artistic, spiritual, the commerce exchange, like it really began to, really like just form that the way we would see like what we have there today.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what's so, when you get into looking at and thinking about our ancestors and the things they've done, and it becomes very meta because it's like, this is not the first time Native people have done this. We're doing it again. We're gathering, our ancestors were here. Our ancestors were in communication with other mound builders in the southeastern United States. We were all practicing a similar religion going back at least 1,000 years. And now we're right back here and we're doing the same thing. We're trying to bring people together. We're trying to help people understand the history and understand the culture. And that is the mound builders and that culture, to this day, it just keeps coming into my life as like a cultural moment, educational moments, and as a reminder, like a physical reminder of our ancestors and that they were here. And not only were they here, they were brilliant. They were traders. They had trade networks. They had this unbelievable culture that I don't know if we've truly wrapped our minds around yet. We think we kind of understand it. And that's where archaeologists will tell you they understand it. But as Native people, you're always like, do you?
Right.
I mean, I have a lot of respect for some archaeologists and the work they do when it's done in the right way. But, understanding what they were doing, when you go back 1,000 years, and like when I worked in Ohio, and those sites in Ohio are 2,000 years old. Right. And they were building mounds, and not just mounds, but like alignments that ran miles long. All of the, basically they were creating different circles, squares, different shapes. And across the state of Ohio, they're all the exact same width. Like they had a system of measurement. It just begins to kind of blow your mind. What our ancestors were like capable of and what they were doing. And that's so intriguing to me. It just puts you in awe of their knowledge and their understanding of their environment and their world. And it's like something I'm eternally chasing, in a way. I just really wish I understood. Like, when they say, if you had a time machine, where would you go back? And I'm always like, to the mound builder.
Right.
I need to know what was happening there but I'm sure it was communities just like today, coming together, people coming together, ceremony, right. Acknowledging different times of the year or different celestial events that were important. Right. So yeah, those are so special. And the fact that FAM, as we call it today, has this amazing, massive modern earthwork is just still so, so cool.
Yeah, so that whole concept of the 21st century mound builders and our conversations over the years about that reality and that ancient identity, culturally, historically, it's been fun and interesting and important for me to be on that journey, for us to talk about what that meant to employ resilience and that proof of resilience. And we were, speaking before the show started about your friend who came and spoke with us about, our dental record, like our dental realities and how that showed times of drought. Like it's amazing what you can learn from a culture, people's teeth. Yeah. And shout out to my dentist friends and my friend Glenaz, because like we
take care of our teeth.
But to show like those times of severe stress and drought, and the fact that we survived over and over again periods of near extinct starvation, but also drought. And that also motivated migration and movement patterns of Native people and tribes and cultures.
Yes, absolutely.
It's interesting. It's really interesting. If you think about the North American continent as a whole and what that has meant from, pre-removal realities.
Yep.
And those, so if anybody, has visited the First Americans Museum or goes to visit, you will see Stacey talking just so flawlessly and just intellectually in just a really special way.
Thank you. I'm not sure about that.
On the media pieces about how sophisticated tribal cultures have always been and still are today. And those, those cultural economies and the experiences, like that was sophisticated from pre-European contact. And it's just really so interesting. I think we're, like you said, we're still on our journey to understand those realities and those experiences today.
Yeah. And it's so empowering. That's why it's so important that people understand and learn this history. And it's a shock. I mean, it probably won't be a shock to a lot of the listeners, but it's still shocking that it is not taught in public school systems. And for the most part, the history of this continent is not taught, because it's when you learn that about your ancestors that you feel like you can feel yourself literally. You're like sitting up taller. You're like, what? We traded shark teeth in the Gulf of Mexico for obsidian up in the northern plains. Like, those are my ancestors that you're talking about. Those are my ancestors that you're talking about, understood how to build a mound and how to use clay. And I mean, it's empowering. It's interesting intellectually, but it's also empowering for us to understand where we come from. And it's still a travesty that more people don't understand that history.
Absolutely. It's a travesty we don't teach it in our schools. I mean, think about that. If we collectively could draw upon the strength and wisdom and realities and resilience of, so many diverse cultures in, what's now Oklahoma, native or non-native, and collectively together, I mean, that's a real point of pride. Yeah. And if we could teach that, it would really share, what it means to be a true Oklahoman. In our Choctaw language, Okla is people, Homa is red. But we collectively today, we transcend our challenges of experiences. And really, there's been this sense of rebirth and commitment to new identity, new experiences, a continuation, the continuum, if you will, of culture. And I know that you, working with our team and the team that you built under your management with the First Americans Museum, you really fostered such a great experience with tribal consultation and preparing for the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, what is now the Winneco exhibit, working with awesome people like Nancy Fields, Nancy Strickland, and then, working with Welena and now we had such an incredible team, and like Hallie Winter and other people contributing to that experience. But being able to reconnect and reunite people with, our history really isn't that far, it's not that long ago. Yeah. In the big picture, these are very recent events, and the fact that we still have living ancestors that can speak about those realities in emotional and moving and knowledgeable ways is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is like, I think we used to say something like the journey continues, because the journey of our ancestors and everything they've been through, it didn't end. We're here today. We're picking up the pieces. We're trying to, revitalize. We're trying to pay homage to everything that they did. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge, like for the Caddo, for instance, they were removed twice. They were removed from their homelands around Northeast Texas and Louisiana. Then they were forced into West Texas, and then they were run out of, West Texas under threat of annihilation, like literally had to leave in the middle of the night. because they were going to be annihilated and, arrived in Oklahoma. And so you lose, a lot when you leave your homelands and you leave the plants and you leave the sites and you leave your people, you leave your ancestors and your family in the ground, and you were just focused on survival, right? And so many tribes that face that, not all did, but a lot of the tribes in Oklahoma did. You lost so much. And it's like a miracle when you have these remnants that are still, it's like a testament to the strength of that culture, because you'll see it's not lost. There are still language speakers. There are people that remember that ceremony. You get this opportunity to like reconnect to who we were. So yeah, it's really heavy.
It is heavy.
It's beautiful. It's heavy. It's like our history, but it's also the hope and that glimmer of hope, because when we used to be in the rooms talking about the exhibitions, some of our team, and we would be literally going over everybody's stories of removal and like the really hard stuff.
Yeah.
And we would say, oh my gosh, we would just be emotionally like drained from thinking about it all.
Right.
And we were like, it's a miracle. We're all here today in this room, like able to think about it and carry those stories forward. It's so empowering, again, to know the history, but to be able to move forward and to create new history in a way.
Absolutely. The team that we had, just so incredible. And the backgrounds from different experiences professionally, personal heritage, from different tribes that represented different areas of the state in North America. And just to be able to draw upon that in a meaningful way to develop the exhibitions, those are some of the best days. But historic trauma is real, and some of that exists still today, as we see. And it's like this guitar string that spans from, millennia or decades back to today. And sometimes it gets just tinged, and you feel it reverberating forwards and backwards. And I know we've felt it in different ways, but I really appreciate your commitment and contribution to that work with what's now FAM, but also, being that first director of the Choctaw Cultural Center that I was so blessed to be a part of in developing and building, and just seeing you come on board with that and supporting that effort. I love it. If for the listener, if you have not been to the Choctaw Cultural Center, I hope you do attend. I'm just so proud of all the hard work that everyone put into it, from Choctaw Nation and all of our committed consultants and friends, because we got to dive into the content in a deeper way than we were able to with the First Americans Museum, because we weren't covering 39 tribes, we're covering art. So the fact that we were able to work with just incredible people like, Dr. Ian Thompson and others, Ryan Spring, I could sit here and name Sue Folsom, so many others, that really we were able to dive deep into some of that more historic understanding and knowledge and realities to share. And you can't experience it all in one visit. So I really want to say thank you too for your work in championing the opening of that. And it just is amazing.
That was, again, I feel like my career has been based upon phone calls I get. And it's like, that's interesting. I didn't see that coming. I'm sure Gena had something to do with it. But, so there's two things I want to cover talking about that. First, quickly, is personal. So my grandmother's Choctaw. My grandmother was always on the Choctaw rolls. Her daughter, my Aunt Mary Ann that you mentioned, they were all Choctaw. And it was such a source of pride for her. And my grandmother, Corinne Halfmoon, was on the board for the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic for 20 years. She was on the board
Our pharmacy is actually, I've been blessed to be on that board, but The pharmacy is actually named after your family because of their commitment and long-serving, status supporting the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic.
For 5 foot tall, she was the strongest and most powerful woman I've ever known.
I have no doubt. She knowing your family, I have no question about that.
I give my grandmother Mimi, we called her Mimi, but she was Corinne. Lancaster was her Choctaw name, Halfmoon. She married a Caddo, Delaware. Lucky for her. I'm kidding.
Speaking of strength for the listener, Stacey's also the descendant of Golden Glove boxers as well, the Halfmoon brothers.
That only comes out when I drink. I'm kidding. But Mimi, when I got the call from Sue at Choctaw Nation, and they were like, she said, we're building a cultural center, and we hear you have a little experience with this. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I have to answer the calling of my grandmother's people and the Choctaw people because it's a big part of who I am. And I had never lived down in the Choctaw country, which also overlaps ancestral Caddo land.
Right.
So I was just like, okay, this is bigger than me, and I'm going to follow it. And such a blessing. I literally walked away from that job being so, oh my gosh, I don't even know the word, enamored. Like, I am just, to this day, I will never get over the strength of the Choctaw people and their organization, their government, the way they dealt with, early other nations coming in, colonists coming in, the Choctaw people. It's like hard to even summarize. Like, absolutely go to the Cultural Center because you can begin to see the story of how these mound builder centers, the Choctaw were part of that culture. And Chickasaw, they were Muskogean speaking peoples, probably massive confederacies of people early on. And what they faced with removal, the Choctaw people were the first tribe to be removed as a test by the government.
And intentionally ill-prepared.
Horrible.
Intentionally in the winter. And, you hear these stories about tree huggers. Well, that really, like, think of that environmentally, but it's really about the pain and the people literally hugging our trees from our homelands and mourning, leaving. And it's really emotional. And it's just, I'm always grateful to know people like you that understand that story, because I think we see and hear one another when we really honor that history and the sadness that it brought upon our people.
Oh, and, my grandmother's to me, this embodiment of like the strength that carried through. And her family went through that. Her father went through that. And then she was a victim of boarding school. She used to tell me when I was little, she would tell me the stories of running away. She ran away from boarding school 7 times, and she was 5.
What school was she at?
She went to Goodland.
Yeah, my grandma and her sisters were at Wheelock. Yeah.
And so that, the Choctaws and their strength and their size and the way they uphold women, traditionally women had a lot of power there, and it just all started to make sense about my grandmother. I was like, oh, I'm like, you are like this little powerhouse.
Warrior.
She really was.
The way we resolve conflict.
Yes.
I mean.
And it was, even though she was intimidating, you knew it was from love. You knew that toughness and looking out for you and like questioning, hey, are you doing the right thing in your life? You'd be like, oh my gosh. But it always was a place of love. And so the Choctaw Nation will always be a part of my heart. And I'm happy that I was able to help in any way get the Cultural Center open and up and running, and the stories that so many people worked on, those exhibitions, the live casts. It's amazing.
Well, I've always appreciated your knowledge, also your creativity, You were always a champion of new public programs that really tested the boundaries of cultural knowledge and identity and doing some fun things that had never been seen before. I remember what we were doing with the astronomy stuff, and we were
Yes.
doing the braided paths with all the
fun.
tribes.
Yeah.
And I still am not quite over you not showing me the script of all the traditional names that I had to read on the fly that one night in the program. No, we've experienced ghosts together in the theater,
boy, we
Pollard
did.
Theater. No.
That's a shout
That's
out
another-
to Miami,
yes.
Oklahoma, and your
Yeah,
haunted
the
theater.
Ottawa tribes, the 9 tribes, Ottawa County. We had a wonderful time, and everyone was lovely and incredible. But
And only I got scratched.
I know. Yeah. So, but also we did some fun things with like the Weather Center in Norman, the art museum. Sterling Harjo's first film, you were really the champion of piloting some fun things that are now a part of that foundation of of programs for the community at FAM. And I love that you were you were creative and knowledgeable, but also willing to have some fun with things. And it's been wonderful. And even in times of chaos and calamity with the legislature and other experiences with our funding and realities, we always had fun together. And so Stacey Halfmoon, I can't wait to have you back on the show. And it's just been such a gift and just a blessing to be here with you today. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. This was wonderful. I appreciate it very
Thank
much.
you. Yakoki, I would say thank you in Caddo, but as you told me in tribal consultation, didn't Mr. Parton say, we don't have a word for thank you? Nobody ever gave us nothing.
Right. We had a Caddo elder, and I was like, now, Fred, how do I say thank you? I'd really go to him for advice. I said, how do you say thank you in Caddo? And he was like, well, Caddos don't have a word for thank you. And I said, what? Really? Why? And he was like, because nobody ever gave us nothing. He was funny.
So I would say the Caddo word, but today I'll say Yakoki.
Yakoki.
Oh, I love you, my sister.
Love you.
Yakoki, thank you for joining us. Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.